Martin Van Buren enters the American story not as a battlefield silhouette or a thunderous orator, but as a tactician born to a borderland of languages, a boy of Kinderhook, whose first music was Dutch, and whose adulthood would be devoted to translating popular feeling into the grammar of power. He is small, immaculate in dress, soft in voice, and relentless in purpose. Where others carve reputations with swords or pamphlets, he builds something less theatrical and more durable, an apparatus that makes consent repeatable. He believes parties are not diseases of the body politic, but its circulation. That faction, disciplined, can become representation, that loyalty, organized, can become law. The Republic, suspicious of parties in theory and addicted to them in practice, needs a builder who will admit the addiction and supply the infrastructure. Van Buren is that builder. If Washington gave the executive its posture and Jefferson its conversational tone, Van Buren gives politics its system, and with it, the long habit of peaceful alternation that later ages will mistake for inevitability. He is not a statue's hero. He is something subtler, an engineer of legitimacy. He begins where America's first political weather still smells of Europe. Kinderhook is half old world, half new. A village where the Dutch tongue lingers on porches and the law rides circuits. His father keeps a tavern, and the boy watches men turn grievance into motion with talk. Dutch at home, English at school. He grows bilingual in more than language. He learns to hear the local story and also the national plot, to translate between neighborhood pride and national purpose. He reads law under William Van Ness, a federalist with sharp elbows, and grows into a practitioner who files arguments with the economy of a man who knows how long a sentence can live in a judge's patience. He becomes known for the tools that rarely win applause and often decide outcomes: timing, procedure, the courtesy that opens doors, the silence that keeps them open. He is not the kind to mistake a gesture for a policy. He learns early that in a republic, relationships are policy. New York, swollen with commerce and feuds, is his laboratory. The state's politics are a tangle of patrons and resentments. Offices have been personal property. County courthouses behave like family estates. Van Buren and his allies buck tails to their enemies, resolved to civilize the mess by organizing it. Out of this resolve comes the Albany Regency, a name given in mockery and remembered in accuracy. It is not a conspiracy, though adversaries call it one. It is a disciplined network, newspapers breathing in rhythm, county committees that can deliver numbers because they know names, an ethic of party that prizes rotation and loyalty over private whim. The Regency does something more radical than it admits. It takes what was already true, that politics depends on alliances, and builds a public rationale for it. Party as the instrument by which a scattered people can be heard. Party as a school that teaches citizens to think beyond the parish. Critics hear machine and are not wrong. Admirers hear institution and are not wrong either. Van Buren's gift is to make the second truth tame the first. He studies national currents and chooses his early boats with care. The Virginia dynasty is ending. The country is outgrowing the old gentlemanly arrangements. He tries William H. Crawford as a vessel for his theory of coalition and learns how fragile candidacies become when health fails and cabals stiffen. He does not squander the lesson. By 1824, when Andrew Jackson's fame is moving through the electorate like weather, Van Buren is one of the first to grasp that the general's popularity can be translated into an era if the right architecture is built beneath it. Jackson supplies voltage, Van Buren supplies wiring. He helps carry New York. He accepts short-term defeats. His Senate vote against Adams's appointment of Clay costs him, but he keeps the long arithmetic before him. The Republic needs a national two-party frame, and the only way to build it is to build one side well enough that the other will have to respond in kind. Between 1824 and 1828, he becomes the quiet architect of mass democracy done by rule rather than by riot. Newspapers tuned to a common key, rallies that sound like invitation rather than intimidation, a language that makes the people less a rhetorical flourish and more a list of precincts. He systematizes the energy that Jackson summons. He does not loathe elites, he demotes them. He believes leadership should be earned regularly, by election, and administered by organizations that can be thrown out without breaking the state. In this mood, He is both radical and conservative. Radical in insisting that the nation's will must be aggregated anew, conservative in insisting that aggregation be done by rules. The spoils system, laughed at by those who think decorum is the highest public virtue, becomes under his hand less an orgy of favoritism than a rotation that prevents office from coagulating into tenure. He does not make saints of his friends. He asks for work. Jackson, elected, hands him state, and the quiet man with the neat collar enters the chamber where the rough man with the scar intends to govern by will. At first their styles look alien. The general loves proclamations and pardons. The New Yorker loves memoranda and quorums, but each finds in the other what he lacks. Van Buren gives the Jackson presidency administrative ligaments, careful notes, quiet handshakes, the tact to watch tempers without inventing new ones. He manages the French indemnity quarrel with a patience that turns affront into payment, helps arrange recognitions and invitations that do not cost blood, and practices the old diplomatic art of letting other men discover he was right before they realize they have conceded. He sees the Eton scandal become a morality play that devours the cabinet, and, when the president needs a way to save face while saving momentum, he offers his own resignation, and with it the hint that all can resign and begin again. He will be named minister to Britain, an appointment the Senate, under Calhoun's spiteful gavel, will kill with a tie-breaking no. The defeat looks like a humiliation and functions like a blessing. Jackson, enraged and grateful, takes the little man to his heart, and the country learns the name with the hair brushed forward. The partnership then becomes a doctrine. Executive energy married to party discipline. Loud appeals married to quiet carpentry. In 1832, Van Buren returns as the vice presidential nominee. The Kinderhook fox, leashed to Old Hickory's thunder. He is not insulted by the jokes. He does not correct them. He will be the successor who makes Jacksonism governable after Jackson leaves. He knows succession is harder than victory, that inheriting charisma is like trying to wrap a fist around fog. He also knows that the experiment requires continuity. The election delivers it. The day he takes the oath, the country is already trembling in ways that owe as much to London and New Orleans as to Washington. But the trembling will be blamed on him and called policy. The panic of 1837 arrives like a floor giving way. The cotton market turns, British credit tightens, specie flows reverse. And years of exuberant lending in state banks, fattened by federal deposits pulled from the national bank, resolves into a crash. Men accustomed to equating prosperity with virtue search for villains and find, conveniently, a neat man who speaks softly about principles in a capital suddenly bereft of cash. It is easy to rhyme Van Buren with ruin, and the Whig poets do. He does not answer in rhyme. He answers with a program. He proposes the divorce of government and credit. An independent treasury, sub-treasuries where public funds will be kept in coin and not in speculative paper. A system that will starve crises of public complicity and teach the state to be solvent in history as well as in accounts. Critics call it hard money fanaticism. He calls it a safeguard against the next delirium. He refuses to rescue debtors wholesale, to nationalize risk retroactively, or to turn the federal government into a hospital for banks that were glad to be private when prices climbed. The ethic is stern, and the moment is cruel. In breadlines, sternness has a short half-life. He knows this and holds anyway. He believes the long lesson matters more than the short anger. He may be right about economics and wrong about politics. The distinction will cost him. His principled divorce of bank and state is not his only inheritance. Removal, signed and sanctified in the previous administration, becomes its worst chapter in his. Treaties, pressures, divided signatures within nations, and the logic of force combine into marches. Under Van Buren, the Cherokee are driven west under General Scott's orders. The winter roads fill with the evidence that necessity is too often the costume conquerors like to wear when there are witnesses. He could have slowed the pace, softened the methods, interposed the executive's decency against local zeal. He did not. He administered what he had. He believed the Union's promise would be secured by avoiding a war between states and tribes inside the states. He underestimated the moral cost and the memory. The trail of tears runs through his term like a sentence no later accomplishment can erase. He belongs to it as an officer belongs to a document he did not draft but did sign. In foreign affairs, he is drawn again and again to the edge of wars he does not want and refuses to feed. The Canadian rebellions of 1837 and 1838 fire the northern imagination. Filibusters fit out expeditions on American shores. The Caroline affair gives the border its martyr and its excuse. He prosecutes neutrality with a lawyer's stubbornness, arrests private adventurers, and refuses to let local tempers drag the country into quarrels that diplomacy can settle. The British are angered, then mollified. The border remains a line on a map, rather than a sequence of graves. He inherits the riddle of Texas and refuses to answer it with haste. Annexation, he knows, is a solvent if poured too quickly. It will foam with slavery's chemistry and ruin whatever vessel it touches. He demurs, temporizes, demands guarantees, and misses the nomination in 1844 because men who want land now will not forgive the delay. Prudence in a candidate is often indistinguishable from bloodlessness. Polk will take the chair and the gamble. Van Buren will take the rebuke. The 1840 campaign is a carnival he does not know how to enjoy. The Whigs, talented and hungry, turn politics into theater, log cabins, hard cider. A general's hat on a man who will never have to govern because pneumonia will do the job for him. They call him aristocrat because he wears good coats. They call him spendthrift because the furniture in the president's house has improved from the cheap severity that flattered Jackson's simplicity to the clean comfort that flatterers call luxury. They weaponize every detail of his manner. He does not learn to answer with spectacle. He cannot be someone else. He survives the taunts and loses the election, his independent treasury a blueprint not yet lived through, his prudence an insult in a year that demanded promises. He leaves with a smile that is half civility, half armor. He retires to Lindenwold to read, to write, to watch the country choose its excitements. Defeat frees him to become something the Regency had never sought, a moral combatant in a war no apparatus can avoid. The 1840s break the Missouri Truce from within. Expansion makes new arithmetic. The Wilmot Proviso names a fear. Democrats split in New York between hunkers who like comfort and barn burners who will burn a barn to drive out the rats. Van Buren, who had once tended unity like a precious lamp, decides that the lamp is lighting a room too small. He refuses the gag that keeps slavery out of Congress's mouth. Opposes the annexation of Texas as an engine for a planter's empire, and permits himself to be drafted by free soil men who want to stop slavery's spread, even if they cannot yet stop its presence. In 1848, he runs for president as the head of a coalition that includes moralists, mechanics, and moderates who have concluded that expansion of bondage degrades free labor. He knows he will not win. He runs to move the line of the possible. He moves it. When leader Democrats protect the free soil, free labor idea as a cardinal point, when a new party takes it as a founding creed, his fingerprints are on the plank. Through it all, he remains the most composed of men in public and the most tender in private. He is a widower early. He raises sons with a father's gravity and a politician's calendar. He hosts with grace and without extravagance. He writes an autobiography that is surprisingly frank about his method and surprisingly reticent about his heart. He is accused of cunning, as if prudence were a crime, and of system as if improvisation were a virtue. He likes good clothes and knows that the Republic will judge the tailor as if the bill had been mailed to the Treasury. He accepts the judgment and refuses the premise. A president may be shabby or elegant. The policy remains the policy. He travels. He listens. He edits drafts. He makes a habit of refusing to be angry in public. Rage for him is a tool without a handle. It burns both sides of any quarrel. He watches Jackson grow old in Tennessee and keeps visiting because loyalty, once given, is not to be traded for convenience. They do not always agree. They always understand the bargain. The general embodied a people's will. The New Yorker built the avenue for that will to travel without destroying the house. His theory of parties is the part of him that will live longest, because it is the least glamorous and most necessary. He writes, in effect, if not always in treatises, that parties are schools of self-government. They gather opinions, educate them, discipline them, and finally conduct them to power or defeat without blood. He argues that elites who pretend to be above party are simply parties that prefer to act in private. Better, he says, to bring the competition into the light and to give it rules that make losing bearable. He trains a generation of politicians to think of themselves not as personal commandants, but as stewards of organizations. He trains a generation of citizens to think of the ballot not as a quarrel with a neighbor, but as a contest among institutions that will outlast men. He is, in this sense, the midwife of normal politics. The praise sounds faint because normal is boring, and boredom is what free people earn when they have been well governed for a while. The alternative to boredom is crisis. He prefers boredom. To judge him only by the panic is to miss the design. To judge him only by the design is to excuse the pain others paid when his principle met their hunger. He is not a saint of hard money. He is a realist about the way credit turns citizens into petitioners when government makes itself an accomplice to private risk. He is not a monster of coldness. He is a custodian who refuses to raid the future for a present that did not ensure itself when the sun was out. He is not absolved of removal because he did not invent it. He is implicated by stewardship. He is not absolved of inaction where force disguised itself as order. He complicates the easy moral that divides the century into men of heart and men of head. He had both. He balanced them in ways many will dislike. He was usually right that tomorrow matters. He was sometimes wrong that today can endure whatever tomorrow requires. He can be seen, whole, if you hold together the tavern boy learning how men compose themselves into a public, the county lawyer learning that manners outlast tempers, the Regency organizer learning that discipline can be democratic, the secretary who resigns to give his president a way to start over, the vice president who swallows slights because coalition is not a therapy, the president who refuses to counterfeit prosperity, the ex-president who spends his prestige to slow the spread of slavery's power, the old man who walks the grounds at Lindenwold, satisfied in the knowledge that what he built, parties, peaceful contests, an ideal of regular legitimacy, will outlive the monuments erected to noisier men. The gold test of statesmanship is not whether one's name is shouted in schoolyards, but whether the forms one tended continue to carry a people through storms. On that test, his grade is permanent. He had enemies whose gifts outshone his in a single blaze and faded when the fuel ran out. He had friends whose warmth lit rooms he could not warm and whose fires, untended, would have burned houses down. He had a country that preferred spectacle to systems and nevertheless survived because someone had the patience to stitch precincts to counties, to states, to a national canvas. He was that someone for long enough that others learned the craft. When future presidents discover that their program needs a party, and their party needs rules, and their rules need enforcement, and their enforcement needs legitimacy that cannot be taught on the fly, they are living in the house he furnished. When future critics discover that machines corrupt because men corrupt, and that the cure is not rage but redesign, they are arguing inside the workshop he left open. He is easy to caricature and hard to escape. The caricature is of a fox in fine cloth, arranging offices like cards and calling it principal. The reality is of a steward who accepted that free government is mechanical as well as moral, and that the mechanics must be public. He leaves the country with a lesson about money it will forget and then relearn, that mingling public funds with private hunger produces sinecures in good times and blackmail in bad. He leaves it with a lesson about parties it will sometimes despise and always use. that there is no alternative to organization except chaos. And that chaos is merely organization done by men who refuse to put their names on the masthead. He leaves it with a stain he could not wash and did not stop, the march west that filled the ground with grease. To carry him honestly, you must carry all three: the system he built, the prudence he practiced, and the sorrow he allowed. He returns to private life with the elegance of a man who never thought office a costume to be kept when the play ends. Lindenwald becomes a salon for politics and a repair shop for friendships broken by campaigns. He reads, receives, writes long letters in a hand steadier than the times. He studies Europe without envy and America without bitterness. He watches Texas ripen into conflict under other hands and counts the beat of slavery's advance, not as a spectator, but as a man who is chosen to oppose it when it masquerades as destiny. He travels west once, far enough to see the prairie's argument with the seaboard's manners, and returns certain that the continent will insist on being governed by something sturdier than charisma. He believes the only sturdiness any republic can afford is the sturdiness of forms. He keeps saying so, gently and with the confidence of someone who no longer needs the vote. The barn-burner hunker feud in New York, which looks to the nation like a parochial quarrel, tests his talent for nursing principle without murdering community. The barn-burners would burn down the party barn to kill the rats of corruption. The hunkers would keep the roof and hope the rats behave. Van Buren tries, for a time, to be therapist and referee. The decade will not absorb therapy. When the question becomes whether to let slavery's logic annex the territories, he chooses the younger men's fire. He knows the choice will estrange old friends. He has made such choices before, when he thought the Republic's long health required it. He will make them again. He is not a weather vane. He is a barometer. He does not change direction. He registers pressure. His 1848 run on the free soil ticket is both coda and prologue. He collects votes that look to Jacksonian elders like theft and to conscience men like the down payment on a future majority. He carries no states beyond his own machine's reach, but he carries an argument into the ballot box. At free labor is not a class prejudice, but a constitutional aspiration. That territories need not bend to the plantation's arithmetic just because that arithmetic has long dominated the Senate. He watches the returns with the equanimity of a man who understands that sometimes the point of running is to force the others to admit your premise. He forces them. Within a few years, when the nation aligns itself around the lines he helped sketch, he will already be too old to applaud. He will not be too old to feel the satisfaction of a craftsman who sees his blueprint reused with modifications he would have foreseen if age had not shortened his days. Friends write that in private he is charming, quick with anecdotes, and never unkind. Enemies write that he is slippery, a smile with a ledger behind it. Both reports describe the same skill, the ability to keep doors open in a world that likes to slam them. He has the politician's stamina for conversation, listening as if the next sentence might contain the lever, and the administrator's appetite for clarity, writing decisions that others can carry without a whisper campaign. He likes good food, long walks, orderly desks, the precise moment the lamp should be lit. He is accused of fineness and does not apologize. He believes public men owe the public neat stairs and clean floors. Even if rough hands have done the work that day, the country is large enough to include both roughness and grace. He chooses grace where it does not cost justice. He leaves behind not a doctrine that can be engraved, but a practice that must be repeated. When crises make factions scream that institutions are slow, he answers that speed without structure is a revolution that eats. When demagogues say parties are cages, he answers that cages hold beasts as well as birds, and that singing without a perch is a brief music. When men praise independence as if it could govern, he answers that independence is a virtue in a judge and a vice in a legislator. He is the teacher of that middle truth between cynicism and romance, that politics is a craft before it is an inspiration, and that the craft must be kept clean if the inspiration is to be trusted. He is, in this, an American Confucian of the caucus. Rituals matter because they train men to behave. Behavior matters because it keeps the peace. Peace matters because it preserves the space in which justice can be argued without fear. His end is quiet, as suits a life that glorified process over noise. He dies at Lindenwald, the house he had made hospitable without making it a court. The newspapers note the passing, with respect, salted by old partisanship. The Republic moves on in the channels he dug. The independent treasury he designed is repealed by men who want easy credit, and then readopted by men who relearn the cost of easy credit. The parties he disciplined fall apart and reform, as they must, around newer passions and older maps. The idea that parties are legitimate never quite leaves, even when reformers wish it would. The idea that government should not feed credit manias returns whenever credit manias leave the poor with the bill. The shame that attends removal remains and grows clearer when distance cools the justifications. The judgment on his prudence grows kinder when impatience withers into regret. The judgment on his caution grows sharper when caution has been an alibi for injury. He is not rescued by time, he is fitted into it, in the sober light that suits him. The ledger reads this way: he brought to maturity the party system that made mass democracy governable, and made changes of regime peaceful and expected. He disciplined patronage into rotation, and rotation into an ethic, thereby preventing offices from turning into inheritances televised by courtiers. He articulated a vision of the federal financial relationship that protected the Treasury from the appetites of speculation and the pressure of panic. He navigated foreign provocations with an instinct for law and a distaste for war that saved lives and avoided debts. He refused to annex Texas when annexation meant purchasing popularity with the currency of conflict. He failed men and women marching west with their lives bundled because he chose continuity and obedience to an immoral policy over intervention that might have cost him office and saved some from dying. He misread the nation's appetite for relief in a crisis and spoke too much of principle and too little of bread. He wore good coats and was mocked for it. He did not answer because the country's taste for symbols is not a court one should argue in. He lived long enough to move from architect of Jacksonian victory to midwife of anti-slavery containment, a journey that proves not an opportunist shift, but a statesman's argument with time. He gives later ages a usable image that is not a romance, a politician happy to be called a politician because he believes the profession can be practiced with honor, a president willing to lose in order to keep the charter honest, an ex-president willing to run in order to teach the majority a new rule. He is not a bronze hero in a park. He is the design of the park's paths. When the Republic forgets how to walk them, it remembers him by walking them again. When the Republic grows bored with procedure and goes looking for a savior, it remembers him when the savior disappoints and the committees must be repopulated. He is a man for after the parade, when the chairs must be put away and the next day's work laid out. If one wants to keep him true, one says this: he made politics adult. He taught an adolescent democracy the discipline of schedules, caucuses, platforms, votes counted by rules everyone could read. He taught the executive to speak in account books as well as proclamations. He taught parties to value continuity more than tantrum. He did not teach the country how to be kind to the conquered. He did not teach it how to feed the hungry when markets fail. He did not teach it how to receive petitions it dislikes with anything better than a gag, until he left office and dared to join those who refused the gag. His education was incomplete, as all human educations are. His best lessons endure. His worst omissions are warnings still. The picture to keep is not a single portrait, but a sequence of rooms. A tavern where a boy learns that argument is a civic instrument and not a family shame. A courthouse where a young lawyer learns that form saves tempers from becoming knives. A low-ceilinged Albany parlor where newspapers and county captains agree that victory requires system. A cabinet chamber where a quiet secretary places his resignation on the table so a friend can survive. A president's desk where a message proposes to separate the state's money from the street's fever. A riverbank where a man refuses to let volunteers drag the country into a cross-border war because romance is rarely policy. A convention hall where a former president accepts a minor party's banner because tomorrow's majority will need today's noun. A garden at Lindenwald where an old organizer measures the season by leaves, not headlines, and is content. He belongs with the men who bent the nation toward habit rather than spectacle, who taught it that the fairest way to share sovereignty is to count carefully in public and to accept defeat without imagining that defeat is treason. He belongs with the men who disappointed urgent ages and were thanked by calmer ones. He belongs with the men who are most themselves when they are not speaking. His voice is quiet and everywhere. You can hear it whenever a precinct captain knows the names on her list, whenever a platform is written by committee and not by inspiration, whenever a defeated party reforms instead of plotting a coup, whenever a treasury resists the temptation to guarantee every risk and thereby subsidize carelessness, whenever a nation, tempted by war at its border, remembers that embers die if not fanned. The final kindness to him is to judge him by the consequences of what endured. The parties endured, and with them the peaceful traffic of power. The idea that credit should not govern the state endured, and with it the possibility of solvency through storms. The shame of removal endured, and with it the knowledge that obedience is not innocence. The habit of opposing slavery's expansion endured, and with it the architecture for a later victory. The preference for law over war when dignity can be preserved endured, and with it a few thousand lives saved in years when life was cheaper. The clothes did not matter, the method did.